This is what they're going to give you more of if you elect them. Abortion, pot, porn.
Well, reefer madness is back. After President Joe Biden made his stunning announcement that he's actually going to pardon those that have been convicted of marijuana possession, as well as take steps to move marijuana out of a Schedule I drug, meaning it's closer to being decriminalized and legalized. Of course, people on the right freaked out. Now, I'm going to show you some clips, but to my surprise, and really it shouldn't be that surprising, there are some prominent figures on the right who have not, as of recording this, said anything about this at all. So Ben Shapiro, Steven Crowder, Matt Walsh, Tim Pool, so-called centrist Tim Pool, he's on the right, have all been silent. So in my video yesterday discussing this news, I said the only way the right's going to be able to fight back against this, or attempt to fight back against this, is by tying it to crime in some way. And there is a bit of that. But I guess the other obvious thing is they don't talk about it at all, because they know how popular this position is. And actually, I'm going to get to a Republican politician admitting this and actually siding with Joe Biden. Shocking. Shocking. So I'll get there, and I'll also end on a very uplifting note from Bernie Sanders. But first here, just to quickly recap, let me play a bit of Joe Biden's announcement that he made about this.
There are thousands of people who are convicted for marijuana possession who may be denied employment, housing, or educational opportunities as a result of that conviction. My pardon will remove this burden on them. Second, I'm calling on all governors to do the same for state marijuana possession offenses. Third, the federal government currently classifies marijuana as a Schedule I substance, the same as heroin and LSD, and more serious than fentanyl. It makes no sense. So I'm asking the Secretary of Health and Human Services and the Attorney General to initiate a process to review how marijuana is scheduled under federal law.
All right. Pretty good announcement there from Joe Biden. Again, very surprising considering his history. But also, look, I can't help myself. I deserve some credit because I said Biden, even though he is not a good politician, or not a, in terms of his positions and what he has done in his past, not a good politician. He is movable on issues if you push him enough. If there is enough of a movement and support in one direction, and he sees what is popular. Like, again, understanding here, he's doing this because this is popular. This makes him more popular. He isn't doing this because all of a sudden, he's big into weed now. No, he's doing this because politically it makes sense for him. And I always said he's the kind of guy that moves with the wind. If you track his history through the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, his positions usually aligned, even if they were the wrong position, usually aligned with the consensus. And that's where he is now on this. But here we get to the first reaction. So let's do Laura Ingraham. Here's what she had to say.
Well, it starts with marijuana, but where does it go from there? Oregon was the first state to decriminalize it. Then they legalized it for recreational use. And then a few years later, they decriminalized hard drugs, cocaine, heroin, LSD, and even meth.
All right, so Laura Ingraham fear-mongering that this is going to get somewhere crazy. Oh my God, look at that. Isn't that a scary image? Do you want this? Do you want people burning spoons? Well, let me bring you to how this, if that actually were to happen, if it were to go further and they would begin decriminalizing more things, how that would actually be a great thing. Because here's a question you need to ask yourself. Why hardly anyone dies from a drug overdose in Portugal? They decriminalized all drugs back in 2001. At the time, Portugal had the highest rate of overdose deaths. They are now among the lowest in the EU. And that's because of decriminalization, but also because of the investment into healthcare and treating it as a health issue and not a criminal one. So what Laura Ingraham is fear-mongering is actually the solution to the problem. And there is a lot more on this. I mean, by the way, do your own research. If you don't believe me, look this up yourself. Look up Portugal decriminalization and look at the actual results. So there's a great breakdown here from Transform Drug Policy Foundation Saying here, decriminalization in Portugal, what you need to know, drug-related deaths have remained below the EU average since 2001. The population, or the proportion of prisoners sentenced for drugs, has fallen from 40% to 15%, and rates of drug use have remained consistently below the EU average. That's because of decriminalization and their renewed approach to healthcare back in 2001. But they even have some stats here. Here's a new HIV diagnosis attributed to injecting drug use data. So from 2000 all the way down to now, look at how it dropped as they continued with this approach, putting more money to healthcare, not treating this as a criminalized issue. This is the solution. Also, I just want to play, this is 8 seconds, but it's hilarious. So I want to play this as well.
This is what they're going to give you more of if you elect them. Abortion, pot, porn, and more January 6th hearings.
Abortion, pot, porn, and more Jan 6 hearings. What's the problem? I mean, this really speaks to who Laura Ingraham's audience is. People that skew a lot older. Not, again, there are many people that are older that are not completely out of their minds, that do know what is happening, that understand this stuff, that read into it, that are knowledgeable. But when in terms of the actual audience that watches Fox News, they skew much older and they're scared by all these things. So it's just the idea of using that line as a way to scare people away from Democrats is pretty funny. But now let's get to CNN, because they're not, innocent in this either. Here is CNN's Republican strategist, Alice Stewart. Her comments on Biden's moves on cannabis.
I think this will be very impactful for Joe Biden and Democrats in terms of winning over a large portion of the voter electorate that thinks this is an important issue. There are a lot of Democrats, and 3/4 of Americans think that we should legalize marijuana. So that is something, certainly a factor in him making this decision. I see this as a ploy to, in midterms, to gain support and gain voters. I happen to think that marijuana is a gateway drug. I'm not a big advocate for legalizing marijuana, maybe for medicinal purposes, but not as a whole.
Why are you looking at me?
No, I'm saying as a whole. But here's the thing. Part of his announcement was to also advocate to governors do the same at the state level. That's not happening. I reached out to Governor Asa Hutchinson's office in Arkansas. They don't like this. He sees this as waving the red flag of surrender to protecting the lives of those who are victims of drug abuse.
All right. I'm not even sure what that last point she's trying to make there is. The only real difference between legalizing marijuana and it being illegal is the criminal aspect of it. People having criminal records, their lives being impacted in a variety of ways because of that, and just the fuel to organized crime. Because for years, you can get cannabis whether or not it's legal very easily. In fact, definitely easier for teenagers to get it while it's illegal than when it's legal. Because once it's legalized, it's then put under the umbrella of the legalized market. And it's not, no kid can just walk into a store and buy marijuana. So it becomes a lot tougher to actually acquire it. There's this attachment, this weird attachment that these reefer madness people have, where they think legalizing it means that more people are going to get it now and kids are going to get their hands on it, and somehow it's going to, and putting aside the insane idea of it being a gateway drug, which there's no evidence of that at all, but this idea that legalizing means more people get it, more people, abuse it, whatever. Nothing backs that up. Nothing. These feelings that people have towards weed, they're just feelings that they have. Facts don't care about your feelings. Canada decriminalized, or I should say legalized, cannabis back in 2018, and everything is the same. Nothing bad has happened. All the fear mongering around, more kids are going to use it. It's going to increase car accidents, or there's going to be higher rates of schizophrenia, whatever the hell it is. None of that came true. None of it. Everything is the same, except now people are not having criminal records or not getting criminal records for using it. That's the difference. It really is crazy how And they've consistently used these anti-cannabis talking points for decades, proven wrong again and again and again, yet they keep using it even though no data backs any of it up. Now, I want to show you somebody who is surprisingly on Biden's side. Here is Nancy Mace on Fox Business discussing, this is a Republican congresswoman discussing Joe Biden's recent move.
What do you think about President Biden today pardoning thousands of federal marijuana offenders?
Well, I want to give credit where credit is due. I don't always agree with the Biden administration. I've been very vocal about that. But this is a step in the right direction. The president wants to pardon people for very simple possession of nonviolent cannabis offenders at the federal level. And he wants to encourage our governors across the country to do the same. And I think that's a great first step.
All right. And she goes on about, her support in her bill. But this is a rare thing to see. But understand again why even Mace here is willing to say this. It's because this is a very popular issue. Even on CNN, when what's her name? Alice Stewart was discussing this. Even she had to admit that 3/4 of people agree with this position. So, politically, just strictly politically, it is the right, siding with Biden here is the right thing to do, which is also why you're seeing a lot of the right-wing propagandists not even touch this issue, because what are they going to say? Last thing here, I want to end on Bernie Sanders and this very hopeful, positive message after the news came out that Biden would do this.
The idea of having marijuana as a Schedule I drug, along with heroin and fentanyl, is totally insane. People like marijuana, you don't like marijuana. I tried it twice about 100 years ago. Didn't do much for me. Other people, I gather, have had different experiences. But whatever it is, nobody in their right mind thinks that marijuana is the equivalent of fentanyl or heroin, which are killer drugs. And what the president announced today is moving forward to take marijuana off of Schedule I. I mention that not only because it's important unto itself, but because it shows what happens when you work hard at the grassroots level. It's something that many of us have worked on for years, and it finally made its way to the top, and I applaud the president for making that decision. But we've got a long, long way to go. In my view, as I said, I happen to believe that marijuana should be legal all over this country. All right, we've got to continue that effort.
Great message there from Bernie Sanders, pointing to the grassroots, understanding why it's gotten to this place, how society has been able to overcome decades of propaganda, of anti-marijuana propaganda. It's because of the grassroots movement. It's because that, in combination with the science, these people that have been a part of the movement for decades, they deserve a lot of credit for getting to this place. So while Biden is getting a lot of credit for doing this, and he should get credit for doing it, understand we're only at this place now because of the people that came before him that have been fighting for this for years, despite all of the bullshit being spewed against them.